I know this might sound silly, but I used to see the Geek Squad ads on TV with the geeks coming to help the people in the Geekmobile, and I just got so hyped. I thought those guys were so cool, and I think TV shows like Chuck really made the job seem even cooler. If you haven't seen that show, there's a whole parody version of Best Buy called Buy More, and the main character, Chuck, works at the nerd herd within. He also becomes a secret agent super spy, so you get to see him jump around and kick butt when he's not helping old ladies with their computers. I can totally see why I got excited by this idea as an impressionable teenager. I really wanted to be one of those geeks that helps people by day and kicks bad guy butt at night. I mean, I had been helping people fix computers for years by that point, so arguably I was halfway there. Between the TV show and those ads I saw, it made sense that in 2013, I applied for a job with Geek Squad. To my amazement, I got the job while I was still a senior in high school. Believe me when I say, I was hyped. I'm certain the people I worked with thought I was bonkers for being so excited to work for some corporatized version of a computer repair shop, but to me, it was like actually living the exciting dream. Sure, I wasn't a super spy like Chuck, but I got to assist people with all kinds of things, and to be honest, it accelerated my passion for trying to help others. Sometimes people would come in, and everything worked perfectly without explanation. Computers can be kind of funny that way. However, occasionally they would bring in something that was actually scary, like ransomware that had just deleted all of their family photos. I got lucky a few times though, and I was able to recover those files for them. In all of my time working there, as well as future tech support jobs, there was an expression I heard probably more than anything else. I don't know how to use the computer. I mean, I suppose this is why I had a job in the first place. It was to help these folks. There was something else I had noticed about this older group of people. While many of them claimed they didn't understand computers, they could all use their smartphones flawlessly. This had always stood out to me, because I'd always seen phones as just tiny pocket computers. But clearly, there was a large group of older people who viewed this as totally separate things. I know I wasn't the only one to think this was odd. I've seen a lot of people observe this phenomenon and chalk it up to just, old people are stupid when it comes to tech, which really bothered me. I felt like I was missing something here. Why was there this clear separation between a computer and a phone for these folks? What experiences did they have that I didn't that caused them to come to that conclusion? 100 years ago, there were two technologies that were rapidly becoming common in American homes. The first was the telephone. This was a staple of communication for the time, and there was a lot of trust in this technology. Sure, a con man could call you and try to get you to join his Ponzi scheme, but phone scams still work today because social engineering has always worked. Humans are social creatures, and you're inherently more likely to trust a person that you're talking to. The telephone was far from the first method of scamming people, however, and it would certainly not be the last. Even with that fact, this device brought people together in a way that the world had never seen before. You could call your friends to catch up, or you could get a call that brings you the news, good or bad. It was all about connecting others from the start. The other technology was the radio. Similar to the telephone, this was a staple of entertainment for so many people. Like all technology, it was a complex and niche device at first, but by the late 1920s, it was in a vast majority of American households. Broadcasts that occurred during this time were all done live, mostly as a limitation of the technology. You see, these phonographs were used to record music, and some broadcasts sounded absolutely awful going through the radio, so they just didn't allow it for a while. Given that it was live, there were very talented people that would lead these radio programs. You had your news on NBC and CBS, radio plays that would entertain folks, and even live studio bands that would play music. Even throughout the Great Depression, the radio was a core part of life for so many people. They'd surf the radio waves and find a broadcast that interested them and just sit there listening to the radio. I really want to immerse you in what it was like at that time, because I think it's really important to understand how entertainment has evolved. This is a broadcast that was recorded on the evening of October 30th, 1938. This was one of those live bands I was telling you about. I really want you to think about how incredible it was to be able to hear live music for the first time ever from the comfort of your own home.
We are bringing you an eyewitness account of what's happening on the Wilmuth Farm, Groversville, New Jersey.
And that would be the news interrupting the broadcast. This has been the third or fourth time tonight. Apparently, there was some meteor that crashed into a farm in New Jersey. I mean, I suppose the 24-hour news cycle has always been a kind of a problem from the start.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I? Ladies and gentlemen,
Ladies and gentlemen, here I am, back of a stone wall that adjoins Mr. Wilmer's garden. From here, I get a sweep of the whole scene. I'll give you every detail as long as I can talk and as long as I can see. More state police have arrived. They're drawing up a cordon in front of the pit. About 30 of them. No need to push the crowd back now. They're willing to keep their distance. The captain's conferring with someone. Can't quite see who. Oh, yes, I believe it's Professor Pearson. Yes, it is. Now they've parted, and the professor moves around one side, studying the object while the captain and two policemen advance with something in their hands. I can see it now. It's a white handkerchief tied to a pole. Flag of truce. If those creatures know what that means, what anything means. Wait a minute, something's happening.
What is that sound?
Some shape is rising out of the pit. I can make out a small beam of light against a mirror. What's that? There's a jet of flame springing from the mirror, and it leaps right at the advancing men. It strikes them head on. Oh, Lord, they're turning into flames. Now the whole field's caught up by the woods, the barns, the gas tanks of the automobiles, spreading everywhere. It's coming this way now, about 20 yards to my right.
Now, at the start of this broadcast, in just the first couple of minutes, it was said that this was a radio play based on the book The War of the Worlds. However, to most people tuning in like you and I just did, all they heard was a broken-up newscast about a Martian invasion. It would continue from here to dive into even further details about the attack, and it caused quite a stir across the country. This resulted in a lot of people freaking out, and understandably so. Now, it's worth calling out that the panic wasn't as widespread as people claim it was today. But there were certainly a lot of concerned phone calls to local police departments and radio stations that night. There were a couple of really interesting things I learned about this time. The first being that there was a public assumption that there was a civilization living on Mars. In fact, it was believed by many people that all of the solar system was inhabited. This was well before we started sending probes to discover they were all just rocky wastelands. The other thing I learned about Orson Welles, the guy that produced and directed the broadcast, he was only 23 years old. I don't know about you, but I also made some pretty foolish decisions at that age, so I think it makes a lot of sense. What I think is really strange is that when I learned about this broadcast in school, it was said that Orson Welles had just read the book, and that alone caused people to go into a frenzy. Almost as if we were pointing back in time and laughing about how stupid people were 100 years ago. But you heard it. Sure, it's a different medium, and we also know what actually happened, but I could see how that scared a lot of people. I think that's why it's so frustrating to actually hear it compared to what I was told. This has been validatable information this entire time, and nobody that told me that had ever actually heard the original recording. Like, really put yourselves in the shoes of these folks. This device was in their home, and it had been helping them through the Great Depression. It brought them joy, and then to have this horrifying event on the thing that they trusted amidst the tensions of another world war, all done by some kid who failed to read the room? I get why some people would have freaked out. Those were tense times. Though, what times aren't tense? An expression came out of this broadcast that you might think sounds familiar. You can't believe everything you hear on the radio. In context, that certainly makes a lot of sense. And so, as the radio started to get replaced by the television some years later, the same thing followed. You can't believe everything you see on TV. Here's something to think about. Imagine a middle-aged person hearing the broadcast of the War of the Worlds, realizing that it was all a lie by some 23-year-old hotshot from the big city, and then just 30 years later, you're being presented with another out-of-this-world thing, the moon landing. I can see how a group of people who went through that thought, I'm not gonna fall for this again. There ain't no way they just put a man on the moon. I'm not saying I believe this, but I get with that context how that might have happened. Heck, that goes even deeper. Some of these rural farmers didn't even have electricity until the 1950s, and then just 10 years later, there's a moon landing? Again, imagine someone older having no lights in their home for their entire life, and then suddenly it's lights and then the moon landing? Seems pretty hard to believe when you put it in that context. Then, those old folks told their kids it was fake, and then that just got distorted into a messed up generational game of telephone. And now, most people don't even have the context as to how it might have started to spread in the first place. Would I call those people stupid for not believing it based on all that context? No way. It is hard to believe when you look at what these folks were dealing with. But this also helps explain why that expression of "you can't believe everything you see on TV" stayed so strong. By the 1980s, There were dedicated public service announcements being showed during commercial breaks, informing people that they shouldn't believe everything they see on the television. This was mostly targeted to kids that didn't grow up dealing with some of the nonsense their parents did, so they had to be told. While you couldn't exactly trust everything you saw on it, it was still a wonderful source of entertainment. But what is that beeping sound? Oh great, it's a computer terminal. You might notice that in order to use this thing, we have to plug it into a television, or something that looks an awful lot like a TV. Sure, there were computers that could print out to punch cards before this, but when people thought of a computer in the mid-'80s, this is what they saw. A big, scary mystery box for nerds. As time went on, there were attempts to make these gizmos easier to use. The Macintosh would be a notable example of this, as it was one of the first consumer computers to feature a graphical user interface. This made it considerably more user-friendly compared to those scary terminal screens. Of the people that did get to use it, they found it intuitive and easy to use. However, while this computer is remembered as being a success, it was far from being in every home. Computers were both incredibly expensive and still niche at this point, and even companies like Apple and Dell struggled into the 90s to sell the stuff they were making. There would be strides towards making computers easier to use, though. Some notable examples would be Windows 95 in 1995 and the iMac in 1999. While the iMac certainly got people hyped about Apple again, there was one device that I think actually achieved the goal of true simplicity in a way that nothing else had done before. On November 10th, 2001, Apple released the first iPod to the world. I think there's a lot of rose-colored glasses about this era, as the actual response to this was much harsher than I think we will remember. People saw it as an overpriced gimmick. All that hype for an MP3 player? Breakthrough digital device? The reality distortion field is starting to warp Steve's mind if he thinks for 1 second this thing is going to take off. And you know what? That comment was kind of right at first. It was expensive at $400, which is about $730 when adjusted for inflation in 2025. And it was also only made to work with Mac computers, another famously expensive thing to get into. Macs were also wildly unpopular computers at the time, making up a measly 2% of the computer market. In its first year, the iPod made up only 3% of sales from Apple. Remember that at this time, the only thing that Apple made were a few models of computers. Apple was certainly trending away from bankruptcy, but they were not quite out of the woods yet. But despite all the uncertain sales and reception online, one thing rang true. It was simple and easy to use. With this MP3 player, I held it and 45 seconds later, I knew how to use it. This was a clear trend away from the previous gadgets and computers we've been talking about. I mean, the layout of this thing makes so much sense in my opinion. You spin this wheel around to go up and down and navigate long lists of music like it's nothing. And the menus are laid out in such an intuitive way. Here, I'll show you. One of my favorite bands just came out with a new album. Let me find it real quick. Music, artists, the Beths, Straight Line Was a Lie, and there we go. In fact, this menu system was so good on the first try that they didn't change it for the entire run of the clickwheel-based iPods. See, this is essentially the same design, just with a fresh coat of paint. I still use an iPod today. I've seen college kids pick it up and just know how to use it, even though they've never used one in their life before. It's incredibly intuitive and timeless, and that was one of Apple's strong points with their next major product. In 2007, Apple unleashed the iPhone onto the world. It too had a mixed reception online, but the sales said otherwise. When people picked up an iPhone, they knew how it worked. This was not the norm for phones at the time. Just like the MP3 players of the iPod era, the mobile phones that existed before the release of the iPhone were also incredibly obtuse. You had your classic dumb phones where, in order to send texts, you had to mash a few buttons a couple hundred times. Or maybe you had a nicer dumb phone that had a full keyboard. Great, even more buttons. And then there were the smartphones. The BlackBerry. Gugh. Look at all these buttons. Look at that tiny screen. And this interface is, once again, just plain intimidating. When the iPhone was shown off, it was just a glass rectangle with a single button on the front. That button would always bring you back home, no matter where you were in the interface. It featured an incredibly responsive touchscreen, so you could have anything on it. A keyboard for texting, a video for watching, a web page to scroll. It made the entire thing so much less daunting, as it was designed with simplicity at its focus. The iPhone was the first device to properly blur the lines between the entertainment of the TV and the communication of the telephone, and it owed its wild success to the fact that anyone could intuitively use it. With a device that's easier to use being put into a form factor that's familiar and trustworthy, well, I think it makes perfect sense to me that older people don't consider these things to be computers. But there's another group that has a lot more in common with older folks than they'd like to admit. When it comes to computers, kids today are born into a simplified world. Generally speaking, most people younger than the age of 20 don't really use computers. They might use it for school or work, but it's not something they'd normally claim that they understand. It sounds eerily similar to how older generations talk about computers. And I mean, it makes sense. You don't have to learn how to use an iPad or an iPhone. Companies like Apple have been obsessed for years on making technology as intuitive as possible. They don't want you to teach you how to use it, they just want you to use it, and that has resulted in an obvious drop-off in curiosity with these devices. This isn't to say that there are no kids that are good with computers, as that's never been the case. Kids are still perfectly able to dodge security systems just as they always have, and there are more of them interested in programming than there have ever been before. A lot of that has to do with the actual coding curriculum being added to schools. However, even then, a majority of these kids don't understand computers. And just like every previous example we've talked about before, I do not consider this group of kids to be stupid for not understanding computers. A side effect of simplicity is the perception that the technology isn't changing when it really is. It is so easy to overlook the complexities of these phones because they're designed to not be perceived that way. It's easy to underestimate things like constant data tracking and basic online safety. You and I are more likely to be familiar with tech to some extent. We've been victim to scams. We know what to avoid to stay safe online. Heck, if you're watching this channel, you're probably concerned about online privacy. People don't normally just care about privacy out of nowhere. Usually, it's the result of their privacy being violated. You may have been a part of a data breach, or you might have had your info stolen, or you might have had an account hacked, or possibly even been doxxed before. Think about the fact that you likely didn't care about these things until it impacted you. Now think about the vast swaths of young people who are starting to enter the online world for the first time. They don't watch my videos. In fact, they're more likely to be the ones to say, "Who cares? They have my data anyways," because they simply haven't had to deal with it yet. They're also likely using the internet from a smartphone, where things are so simple that it can be easy to overlook the risks of being online. The internet feels so different today because it is. There are substantially more people using the internet than the old internet days. The ease of use of technology has enabled more people to log on, which has both pros and cons. Most people don't know how to use a computer beyond what their job might require them, but that pesky phone we've been talking about, everyone knows how to use a phone, from children to members of Congress. I don't know if you've noticed, but the world is kind of a crazy place. Everyone has something going on, and it's so important to remember that. Every single person you've ever seen your entire life has lived a life just as complex as your own. Not necessarily better or worse, but certainly complex. People are allowed to not have the capacity to understand all this technology. Kids today are not stupid for not understanding technology, just like the older folks aren't stupid for those same reasons. Context matters a lot, and identifying groups of people as stupid because you don't have the context is just plain unhelpful. To my fellow tech-knowers, it is our responsibility to help the people who don't know what we know, and to help them with kindness and patience. Assuming they're stupid doesn't actually do anyone any good, and it further isolates people into trusting their depression rectangles even more. If you understand technology, I encourage you to try to help however you can. If you consider yourself someone who isn't good with technology, you're not stupid. You just need to be careful with who you talk to online, and you need to consider the consequences of having a screen glued to your face for 10 hours a day. But do you know what's kind of funny to me? I'm now at the age of those same adults who warned me of these things when I was a kid. I generally took their advice, but there were certainly moments where I ignored it. I should have been way more careful with who I talked to online. And that was at a point in time when there were significantly fewer people on the internet. The landscape is even scarier today with things like AI, corporate data collection, and just the sheer amount of people using the internet now. So me telling this to kids today, well, I kind of know how the story goes. It was scary back for the adults when I was a kid too. Just try to be careful. And if you're ever worried about something that occurs online, please talk to someone you trust in your life, like maybe a nephew who's good at using the computer. Or if you're a kid, talk to your parents. Find connections in whatever ways you can. I want people to be social because it's what we're best at. Try to be safe online, but also try to have fun. It's a wild place that's ever evolving, but I think if you have your wits about you, you'll be okay. And talk to people you have in your real life too. I find an enormous amount of joy from helping people understand technology. I know for a fact I'm not the only one. I assure you, there are lots of folks who want to help you understand technology, just like that super spy I looked up to when I started this journey. As always, please be kind and patient with each other. I don't do sponsors or affiliates or anything like that here, so if you want to support the channel, go to patreon.com/rejectconvenience. For $1 a month, you'll get to watch these videos early and get your name in the videos and more. Massive thanks to the names scrolling by right now. Y'all are the best. Peace.
I've been acting different. Everybody said I went missing. Anybody checking on me, listen. I've been knocking out on text on the internet. Anybody heard it yet? Distant. Working on my fond ambition. Out of body inefficient. I've been all stressed, need a cigarette. Maybe just a bigger jet. Better yet, go fly. Away from all the weed that got me high.
Oh no! The War of the Worlds was real. The Martians are really attacking. My only regret is that I didn't subscribe to the channel. And I also didn't like the video, nor did I leave a comment. So now I will certainly perish by beams of flame with regret in my heart. Unless, maybe, if I do those things now, I will be spared. Oh, no way, that actually worked. You there, you should follow my lead. It's clear that leaving a comment, liking the video, and subscribing are the only ways to get rid of these pesky Martians. Go on, I'll wait.
Lights out, I've been too down bad. Caught on my words, don't even know what
Oh my
said,
god,
what
it's
you heard.
back!
This ain't
Why
the
aren't
real
you
me,
clicking
she
those
in the woods
buttons?
with the bees and
If
the
even just
birds
one of you
fly.
watching right now doesn't like, comment, and subscribe, it's gonna...